Well, hey, friends in Christian faith and the natural sciences. I won't go into details about my maladies, but I'm trusting that by Wednesday all shall be well again. So, but I want to talk a little bit. Wow, the reading last Friday from Daryl Falk. I'm just going to highlight some things to make sure that you're getting or you see the same kind of stuff that I would want you to see, or at least to consider, and that some ideas here that could really work for a third reflection paper for sure. I'm going to start with a quick note on 106, right above burial sites. Much as I love Daryl Falk, and it's a lot, I think I said this to you before. I see no inherent value in using the Latin term imago Dei or Dei rather than just saying image of God. There's nothing fancy, or it adds nothing extra to put it in Latin, but that's a superficial complaint. But the last paragraph there above burial sites, the reflective minds of which Teilhard wrote, that is that our ancestors reached a point of reflection or reflexivity. And I want to just say real quickly, Falk talks about some of the people. In fact, down in the footnote on that same page is where it is, footnote 8. Falk talks about some of the contemporary or modern writers, or contemporary writers who have been influenced by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, of whom we've spoken in class, French paleontologist, priest, theologian, and controversial certainly in his own time, less so now, but embraced, I would say, especially by, we might say, progressive Catholicism and progressive theology outside of the Catholic domain as well. And someone, here's my added note, just to remind you that John Hout, the author of our Science and Religion text with the three models, conflict, contrast, and convergence, Hout definitely owes a lot to Teilhard, especially as he puts forth his convergence model. The other thing to say about image of God is that Falk goes on to say, Aquinas said is a property of the image of God in each of us. And I'll give him a pass since he seems to be talking about what Thomas Aquinas thought. I don't remember, we've talked about Thomas Aquinas a little bit, since this is Christian faith and the natural sciences. Remember that Thomas Aquinas lived in the 13th century, 1225 to 1274, died at 49, was deeply indebted to the philosophy of Aristotle, one of Plato's students who basically rebelled in many ways against Plato and Plato's teacher Socrates. Those two teachers having put a priority on the soul, particularly the disembodied soul, as the true source or inlet for knowledge of the most wondrous kind, of the true ideas. The body just gets in the way and sort of messes with our minds, you might say. Whereas Aristotle, you might recall, put a great deal of stock in our bodily encounters with the material world through our sense experience, and he very highly valued that kind of knowledge. Aristotle's philosophy lay relatively dormant in comparison to Plato for centuries, and it was only when a pair of Islamic philosophers, we may have talked about this is some good background for you, a pair of Islamic philosophers in probably the 8th, 9th centuries, Averroes and Avicenna, those are Latinized forms of their names, translated Aristotle's Greek writing into Latin for the first time and added commentary on Aristotle's philosophy, thus introducing Aristotle into the Western Latin-speaking world. The first main figure to sort of imbibe this new philosopher mediated through these Islamic thinkers was the Jewish thinker Moses Maimonides. About a century or so before Thomas Aquinas, Maimonides doing it as a Jew and kind of as then a Jewish rationalist theologian, philosopher of religion, physician, astronomer. Did I say doctor? He was everything. And then to Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. Well, all that to say, when Falk says that Aquinas said the capacity to understand is a property of the image of God in each of us, it's quite possible that that's the way Thomas Aquinas put it. I just want to perhaps belabor the fact that, in my judgment, this is just the wrong way to think about image of God. We're never told in the Bible that the image of God is something within us. We talked about this in class. Because the minute we go, the image of God in us, then we cast about trying to figure out what it is that is the image of God in us. In this case, the capacity to understand is what Aquinas apparently said. And that's been a leading, competitor. Reason. Others have been creativity, freedom, imagination, the capacity to imagine our future, all kinds of different things that sometimes people have said, well, that's the image of God in us. Well, again, in the Bible, it's never something in us. We are created to image God. You must think of it as a verb. We are created, human beings, that is, according to the Bible, to reflect who God is and to reflect God's character and purposes in the world. In Genesis 1, this is quite clearly the job to reflect God in God's approval of creatures, with each day saying, it is good, seeing that it's good, and inviting these creatures to reproduce and flourish. I think we probably talked about this, but this seemed like a good time to go to it again. Now, one more thing to add. It's quite likely that we should acknowledge that human beings have developed, I would say over time through the long processes of evolution, from my perspective, we have developed certain capacities that help equip us to reflect God, but these capacities are not like the image of God in us. These are sort of the hardwiring that makes it possible, we might say, for us to hear God's call upon our lives, to respond to that calling or not, to accept responsibility to reflect God in the world or not. But nonetheless, again, it's far more of a relational kind of thing than a substance within us. Moving along quickly, I'll note that, I love the stuff about the cave drawings, very significant. I got a kick out of the bottom quotation in 113. One of the scientists describes the scene of these horses. Here you have an ensemble of horses, but their open mouths suggest that they are whining. And I'm just pretty sure, I don't know if Daryl misquoted or if the original guy said whining. Well, I probably meant whinnying. And to whinny, I don't know if that's W-H-I or just W-I. It is a word, to whinnying, rather than whining. I don't think we can tell if the horses are whining, but they look like they might be whinnying. Really lovely stuff on 114 and 115. He cites Acts 17 at the bottom of 114, which I think we've already looked at in class. I want to look at that top paragraph on 115. One of the scholars that's worked with these cave drawings summarized what happened in that cave by saying, quote, "It was not a primitive beginning or a slow evolution. It burst onto the scene like a sudden explosive event." Well, that might be, but I still want to argue that there was a slow evolution leading up to this sudden explosive event. "It is as if the modern human soul has awakened here." Now that's interesting language, and because we might go, soul. Notice its soul has awakened here. Obviously, for one thing, this is a scientist using somewhat poetic language. I doubt if he really, I don't know for sure, but I doubt if he has any idea of a literal soul in mind. Anyway, another, commenting on the name of our species as Homo sapiens, pointed out that sapiens means, and he didn't need this comma after the verb means, that sapiens means the one who knows. So you just don't need that comma in there at all. "Given our ignorance, that is not a good definition at all," he states. Instead, he suggests that we should be known as Homo spiritus, or something like that, which would be, the one who spirits, longs for spirit. By this time, 35,000 to 37,000 years ago, clearly members of our species were reaching out beyond themselves. Given our faith in the God who is love, so key to this entire book, we can safely assume that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit, in turn was reaching out to them. Now, I guess he means in turn to their reaching out, but we would actually want to insist theologically that those initial reachings out by humans were already instigated and inspired by God, the Holy Spirit. So it's not that the Spirit in turn was reaching out to them, but that the Spirit in calling and wooing and awakening the nascent human mind as it begins to ask questions of meaning and direction and purpose, that they are responding to God. So they in turn were reaching out toward God, however opaque their understanding of the spiritual reality that they were seeking to take hold of. That's a very important point. The whole kind of cosmology and we'll say theological anthropology that my friend Darrell Falk is exploring here is that God is love, and as love, God has always been love. God didn't decide at some point to become love or loving. That in fact, as he's already talked about in the doctrine of the Trinity, one of the things we're saying regarding God is that God has always been this way, that there is a unimaginable, ineffable, that is, we cannot put it into words, an ineffable transcendence to this holy mystery that is social in nature, such that God eternally and everlastingly is, what was and ever shall be, self-giving and other-receiving love, and that's just the way it's always been. So at whatever point we want to talk about the history of the cosmos, or of our own planet, or of hominid races, the idea here would be that God has always been present in active love. for all of creation. A view of things that resonates deeply with me.